All right, everyone. Welcome to another Esoterica live stream. I'm really happy to have folks. And hold on, there's something going on with my microphone. One second. One second, folks. Let me see what's going on down here. Let's see if that fixed it. Not quite, but it's all right. Actually, let's take this here out so it won't really matter. Uh, but yeah, folks, welcome to another Esoterica live stream. I've really been happy with the stuff we've been able to get uh, done this past creation cycle, and really it's amazing the stuff that where we've been able to get done around the channel. And yeah, it's been a really great period. Let me just minimize this real fast. And um, hold on, folks. Sorry, apologies. I'm just getting some tech stuff set up. Hold on. All right. All right, folks. Well, welcome back to again doing the live stream. Sorry, I'm negotiating like 10 things with my camera and all kinds of other stuff. As you know, I'm working with a new setup here, and everything takes a bit getting used to when it comes to how all this stuff works. And for some reason, the chat's not showing up. Let me see what's going on with that. Um, one second, folks. My apologies again. To open it this way, see what's going on with the chat showing up. Oh, there we go. Okay, well, anyways, yeah, thank you for joining me. Sorry for this rambly beginning. Like I said, I'm using new tech, and so everything is a bit complicated. But yeah, what have I been up to on the channel? I look back on things, and the main thing that I got to do recently that was really spectacular was I got to go over to the UK and got to do a really incredible event with Jenny Butler and Marco Visconti and Dr. Angela Pucca, Dr. Jenny Butler, and it was a cool kind of in between kind of event that was neither an academic event nor a practitioner event, but mostly I think the folks in the room were practitioners. And it was an interesting sort of third space that I don't know. I look forward to making these kind of third spaces where we can do intellectual work, but also bring in practitioner voices. Center practitioner voices. Of course, many of the folks that I was working with are practitioners, and so it really allowed for a really cool kind of day-long conversation where we gave papers and we discussed ideas and all the kind of things you would expect in a pretty high level sort of academic, but also a really high level practitioner space as well. So really a lot of fun and really a lot of really cool proof of concept when it comes to seeing just how you can build an event without much infrastructure. Of course, Marco did most of the legwork there, and all thanks to him for doing that. And one is able to really build out an event without much institutional support. And so I was really happy with how that turned out. It was a really, really great crowd, really, really fine people. So it was a lot of fun, really a lot of fun as an event and as a proof of concept, and it really inspires in me the desire to do a lot more in terms of these kind of in-person events. And I'll talk more about my comments about the AI yesterday on the video that I made. But it also one of the counter things that one can do against AI, as much as it's against AI, is do more in-person events. Do more events that are actually in person with human beings sitting across the table at a pub or in a venue. And I think that's a great counter to the kind of soulless experience that some of us have while we're working here on in the internet lands. So a really great event in London. Really, really happy to be able to meet some friends of the channel and see some old friends and make some new ones. So really, really fantastic stuff there. And of course, also the other thing I got to do was head up to Scotland, which I've never been to. Scotland, an absolutely beautiful, beautiful country, and got to go up and spend the weekend at Boleskine House, which folks may know most famously was owned by Aleister Crowley. It's where he began at least his version of the Abramelin ritual. It was eventually owned by Jimmy Page and has its own interesting and wonderful occult history. And it was really lovely to be able to spend the weekend at House Boleskine, overlooking Loch Ness, and seeing the house open for the first time to the public in a couple hundred years. So it was really fantastic to be able to be there, to meet some fans of the channel, to meet some new folks, meet Keith, and who's the chair of the Blessing House Foundation, and it was incredible. I mean, it's really, really beautiful up there. Of course, it was sadly somewhat overshadowed by the passing of my dog. My dog got really, really sick while I was in Scotland, and sadly, we had to put my dog Mississippi down while I was there, and yeah, it's pretty titanically sad. Had to put your dog down over WhatsApp. I was pretty heartbroken about it, but otherwise, it was really, really a lovely weekend. Again, made some many great talks. Just being able to hang out in Boleskine House at night. One of the great things about jet lag is it causes pretty strange sleep schedule. And there was one night where I just woke up at like 3 in the morning or something, and decided just to go downstairs and walk around, and there's a storm raging outside and sort of fog on Loch Ness, and you really get those kind of like pretty creepy kind of vibes that I think only Boleskine House can give you. And so it was a really neat just to be able to sort of stroll around the house basically by myself. Um, but yeah, neat structure, a neat history. I'm really glad to see it back open again, and yeah, happy that this part of esoteric history is open. It's available to the public. You can go there. You can get tickets. You can go there. You can hold events there. You can get married there. There were people getting their engagement photos made just like the day after we were there, which was pretty incredible. And so that was, yeah, really, really fun experience. And then I got to spend a couple days in Edinburgh, which was also really nice. So a great time. I mean, get to hang out with and meet Marco Visconti, who I had not met in person before. So really, really great in that way as well. Um, and then, of course, we've been producing a lot of content here on the channel as well. I've really been happy with the content we've been able to produce here. Had a great time making the episode on Hildegard. Of course, I have a long-standing interest in Hildegard of Bingen, and medieval lady mystics in general. And so it was really great to be able to do an episode on Hildegard of Bingen, especially this relatively curious event vis-a-vis her this exorcism that she did, and really fascinating element of this again, this business of this exorcism, which is again one of the more interesting such rituals to survive from the Middle Ages. It survives from a very early period, and that it was written by Hildegard, not written but revealed to Hildegard, I think makes it all the more interesting. So in that way, it was really, really fascinating to be able to work on an episode on Hildegard. Um, Let me just check something, folks. I'm not seeing any of the chat coming through, so I don't know if it's my software or if you guys haven't actually put anything in the chat. So let me just check it real fast to see what's going on to make sure that I'm actually getting the chat, because it would be really sad if none of them are coming through for whatever reason. So just give me 1 second to check and see what's going on there. Let's go. I'm just throwing a chat in the thing to see if it's working. Yeah, could you guys just do a couple chats to see if the the chat is working out for whatever reason. I see. Yeah, could you guys do a couple chats to see if the chat is working out for whatever reason? I see. I don't know why the chat's not working. I don't know why it's not working. All right, one second, guys. Um, for whatever reason, I'm not seeing the chat at all. One second, folks. Sorry, everybody. I'm not sure what's going on. Why it's not allowing folks to get in the chat. All right, folks, one second. Let me take a look at this, and I will see if I have a setting wrong or something. My apologies. Oh, tech. It's great when it works. All right, folks. Sorry. Here we go. All right, let's just see if that fixes it. I don't know what in the world is going on, why the chat was not working, but I think it is working now. There we go. Great. Hooray! Maybe it's because I didn't have any maybe it's because I haven't drank my coffee yet. So, great. Sorry about that. So what was going on? So, talked about Scotland, talked about Hildegard, talked about I ended with Hildegard. Like I'm still looking at Hildegard's picture here on my other screen. So, yeah, we did that. I did the episode on Belial, which I only have two minds about making these episodes about demons. Mostly because I know they will perform well on the algorithm. They always perform well on the algorithm. But also I feel like they're so boring. And people seem to love them. People seem to love these episodes about Baal and Belial or whatever. Um, and I'm kind of curious, why do you think it is that people love them? I guess it's uh, I don't know. I don't know. Again, I don't know why people like them, but they do. So yeah, maybe folks are saying maybe my screed against AI muted the chat. So yeah, I did the episode on Belial, which was a lot of fun to do, and um, yeah, but a lot that's coming. But I hope that folks are finding that the cadence of how we're doing things here on the channel is a bit better. Prior to this hitting this billion mark, I was making so much content and really driving to really make this content as quickly as possible. And I really hope that setting the pace a little slower is going to allow, for a bit better content, actually. That is to say that the content level is it's getting a bit higher, the production quality is a bit better, and so the main thing I'm really hoping for is that, yeah, a slowdown in terms of the quantity of content being produced is also being cashed out in terms of, a higher quality of content being produced. So, that's the hope. Okay, so folks are saying that there's a feedback in the sound. Uh, let me let me see. There's always something in let me see. Mute me, so that's not gonna work. Um, okay. Are folks getting feedback in the sound? I should have fixed that earlier, but, uh, just let me know if folks are still getting, echo in in the sound. I'm not hearing it myself, but, uh, okay, folks are still getting an echo. Alright, let me see. Let me let me check it really fast. Hold on, folks. Sorry. It's always something, huh? Alright. Let me see if that fixed it. Yeah, I'm sorry for the echo. I'm not sure quite what's causing that. There's not another instance of this open anywhere, so I don't know if it would be that. But, yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have a tech demon to sort this out? Um, there we go. How about that? See if that fixed it. Um, that fixed the echo problem. Um, static from the beard. No, I don't think so. Let me know if that fixed it, folks. If that fixed the echo problem. At any rate, again, like I said, it's me attacking the AI overlords. Now they're taking revenge on my live stream. Okay. But whatever. Let's see. Good. I'm glad folks say it's fixed. Awesome. Great. Um, so let's see what else we've been working on the channel. I mean, the main thing that's coming out pretty soon that's going to matter a lot is that next week I'm going to announce the spring/summer seminar. You know, as we do these on Esoterica, I try to do a, a, a seminar every year where we really deep dive into a topic, whether it's, I did one year, I did an introduction to Kabbalah. Another year we did the Agrippa seminar. Last year we did the deep dive on the Merkava/Hechelet mysticism. And this year we're going to do something else. Now I'm not going to disclose what it is yet because I'll say more about it next week. But for the Patreon folks, you already know what the topic is going to be. In fact, they already have access to the syllabus. So a small nudge in the direction of joining the Patreon if you want to get early access to what we're going to be doing in the summer seminar. Or the spring seminar/summer seminar, it always goes into a long period of time. But the main thing, of course, is that it will be freely accessible to everybody. Everyone's going to have access to it. But the main thing is, of course, is that Patreon folks will get access live and early on. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to teaching it. Yeah, at least this with the post about being in New York is a bit of a clue about what we'll be doing. Speaking of New York, I don't know, for folks who are in New York, I'll be at the Antiquarian Book Fair in New York starting, my goodness, tomorrow. I'll be there tomorrow. And so if you're in the New York area and you want to come to the absolute best rare book market in the world, I think the joke I like to tell is that if the Library of Heaven had a gift shop, it would be the New York Antiquarian Book Fair. It's just like walking into into absolute heaven if you're a book collector. And so, absolutely worth checking out if you're in the New York area. I'll be there all evening Thursday. I'll be there during the day on Friday. So yeah, come say hi if you are interested in hanging out and looking at some old books. Uh, what else? Yeah, a lot of good content on the channel recently. At least, again, I can say that I've enjoyed making the content. I hope you've enjoyed consuming it. The other thing that's sort of in the works, or the other thing that went down, is this. Another video got released recently. Is I got to go to Provo and hang out with Reed Moon, who has one of the most spectacular book collections in the world. And one of the great things we got to do there was I got to give a series of talks on the intersection of antiquarian books and esotericism. And Reed got one of those sessions recorded, and it was really fantastic that he uploaded it to his channel. And it had a lot of fun. I think you can see the difference in energy, right? When I'm doing esoterica content specifically, a lot has to go into making sure all the my P's and Q's are in order, because there's a whole culture of people on the internet whose entire existence is predicated on finding places where prominent people on the internet are wrong, and then making a big hullabaloo about how they got something wrong. And so everything has to be pretty well curated when I make actual esoterica content. And when I'm in person, and even being recorded, I can be a little bit more, I don't know, I wouldn't call it loosey-goosey, but a lot more of my actual pedagogical personality pops out. And so it was really great to be able to meet some folks who are fans of the channel, get to meet some old fans of folks who, April was there, who went to Egypt with me. My buddy Jorge was there, who hosted me in Salt Lake City, and who's just a fantastic gentleman. So I got to re-meet some folks, get to meet some new folks. I got to showcase some books from my collection and from Reed's collection. And so it was really fantastic. So if you want to check out that episode, you can check it out on Reed Moon's fantastic channel, and check out his content. Reed has just the most amazing stuff. I mean, everything from a 17th century copy of the Lesser Key of Solomon to like Wolverine's claws that are screen used. And I think my favorite thing that he had there that isn't a book is he had the hard drive or the data that they stole on Rogue One. That had the plans for the Death Star on it. He actually had the screen-used version of the Death Star plans, which I don't know. I just thought that was kind of cool as a person who's a big fan of Andor and Rogue One. So it was kind of neat to see that in person. So lots of stuff on the channel. Needs to see what else we've been working on, just to give a little commentary before I jump over and start opening it up for Q&A, which is the real purpose of all this. I know that a lot of people can't travel, and so it's not as easy to travel, but that's why I love to have these Q&As, just to be able to hang out with you guys and get to know a little bit more about you personally, and get to your questions, because I can't always get to your questions in the comments and things like that. So it's nice to be able to do these Q&As to be able to catch up with you guys and see all what's going on. That's the other episode that I made recently that I was pretty happy with, was the episode on Trithemius. That episode, I have to tell you, was one of the most challenging episodes that I've ever made on this channel. Positively difficult episode to make. It just required knowledge of Latin, knowledge of Renaissance cryptography, knowing the ins and outs of Trithemius's of his philosophy. Had to translate some stuff that had never been translated before, like the introduction to the Polygraphia. So there was a ton of stuff to do on that episode, and I had a feeling going into it was going to be a long episode. And of course, it spiraled and spiraled and spiraled, and it took me days and days and days to write it, and ended up being well over an hour long. So it was a tremendously difficult episode to watch, or to watch. It may have been that too, but to write it was extremely difficult. But it was an episode that I've been wanting to make a long time. Trithemius is extremely interesting, extremely important in the history of Western esotericism. And it doesn't get, I think, the play that he deserves. I don't think he gets the coverage that he deserves. And so it was really a great opportunity to make an episode on Trithemius and really highlight the things that he was really interesting and important for. So yeah, the Trithemius episode, I think it's the longest episode on the channel that I've made so far. In fact, um, it's even longer than the Jesus episode. I mean, that gives you some sense of just how complicated Trithemius is when covering him and his life and his works are in some sense more difficult to cover than like the historical Jesus. So it gives you some sense of the scale of the difficulty of making that episode. But I was really happy to do it, and it was a great episode, and I'm really proud of it. So I hope you liked the episode on Trithemius. But yeah, lots more coming along with the upcoming seminar. We'll have that coming. But in addition to even to the seminar, I think the next big episode I want to make is gonna be on the Iyun circle, what is called the Iyun, the contemplation circle. And one of the things that's really fascinating about them is that they're kind of like a proto Kabbalah that never took off. Their version of Kabbalah never developed, and yet one of the main texts of the Iyun circle, the Fountain of Wisdom, Ma'yan Chokma, did survive and was continued to be an important Kabbalistic text, even though it doesn't line up with the historical Kabbalah. And so, the Kabbalah represented, of course, by the Zohar. And so, one of the interesting things about the Iyun circle is that that they held that they were 13 Sfirot as opposed to 10. The 10 laid out most famously in the Sefer Yetzirah. They actually hold that there were 13 Sfirot, which in some ways is actually closer to more classical rabbinical thinking of God having 13 attributes of mercy. So at any rate, the next esoteric episodes, which won't be next week probably, but the week after, will be on the Iyun circle, and specifically on their major books and their cosmology. And it's sort of an alternative Kabbalah that basically never came to be. Though, again, one of the things I'll point out is that the Fountain of Wisdom continued to be a text that was studied by Kabbalists. For instance, Moshe Cordovero says that you should read it, and the Baal Shem Tov even instructed Dov Ber Mestritz on the Fountain of Wisdom. So a text that was important enough for the Baal Shem Tov to teach, and for Cordovero, who's my Kabbalistic hero. He's, to me, there's everybody's second rate compared to Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak. And so incredibly important an incredibly important book, although very strange and in fact very poorly preserved. Gershom Scholem even says that all printed copies are corrupted beyond use, and so we'll take a look at that text. Yeah, and I guess the other thing I will say is that yesterday I published this episode on AI, which I thought would be a lot more controversial than it was. The AI episode was not as controversial as I thought it'd be. I think people pretty much generally hate AI. At least the people that hang around here, most people are pretty over it. They find AI videos and AI art pretty I don't know, deplorable. I don't know what the right word is. So it's one of those things where you have to be careful. At least I have to be careful, or content creators have to be careful wading into waters where this stuff is polarizing. And of course, many content creators are happy to wade into polarizing waters, and they're willing to do that because it generates outrage and that generates clicks and money and all the rest. I don't care at all about that. I have no interest or desire to make a penny peddling outrage, just because I find that to be insufferable, and we have enough of that in the world already. And so, one of the things I'm really glad about is that I was able to, lay out some ideas about AI, and basically just give people the reasons why I don't want to have anything to do with it on this channel, why I don't want to have much to do with it at all in my regular life. So yeah, I'm glad that folks were pretty receptive to my reasoning, and people were pretty receptive to why I don't want to have AI art or AI scripts or anything to do with AI here on the channel. So again, I'm quite glad that folks were happy about that decision, And you know, I can't speak for any other content creators, but what I can say is that I'm glad that I'm not going to interact with generative AI in any substantial way. So, um, all right, folks. So I'm going to get to some questions. I don't have a ton of time here on the live. I got to go in about an hour and a half. But yeah, get some questions in if you have questions, especially about content I've made recently or content you want to see. Yeah, please let me know, and yeah, I'll get to them as I can. So let's do that. Let's do that. So, and obviously, folks, if you feel the need or want to support the channel with super chats and stickers, feel free to do that. I will try to get to the questions regardless of whether you do that. I don't want anyone to feel like there's a financial barrier to asking questions, but of course, I will definitely try to get to those if I can. Hey, brother, thank you for becoming a member of the channel. Different ways to support the channel. Keep the lights on. I appreciate that. Looking forward to seeing you in the seminar. Will we ever get an in-depth video on the Souls peregrinations in the Scivias? Yes, I'm going to probably do a multi-part series on the Scivias. For folks who don't know, this is Hildegard's most important mystical, one of her important mystical works. She has several. Excuse me. So, so yeah, I'll definitely be doing at least a couple of videos on the Scivias, and we'll definitely talk about that. The Scivias is such a difficult work for lots of reasons. One, because it's very involved and it's very long, but the other is that it's so episodic that it's very difficult to summarize. And so part of what I find difficult about working with Hildegard, this is true of lots of mystics who, have these kind of castles of the soul or, stations of the soul, is that the texts are incredibly resistant to summary. And so how do you do that? And I don't know quite what the right answer is, if there's a right answer, but I will do that. Yeah, we'll definitely get around to doing an episode on Hildegard. Yeah, I loved your AI video. AI religion is a salient topic. Given your historical insights, how does the society's obsession morph into something esoteric, like simulation hypothesis sounding like Gnosticism? I think that human beings mostly perceive the world pretty similarly, and we live in a world in which the world is not the way that appears to us. I mean, we all know the sun is much bigger than the way it appears in the sky. And if there are these optical illusions, and if the reality of the world doesn't line up to our appearance of it, it seems pretty easy to go from that to maybe the world isn't actually real. Maybe the way the world, maybe the way that we experience the world is not fundamentally real. So I think that it just has to go with taking one element of things, like hyperbolic skepticism, and just running with it. So I don't think that it's it's about it becoming esoteric so much as it just these ideas can just be taken to an extreme, because that's what people do. And they begin ending up looking the same. This is why some people say, they make a sort of specious argument to my mind that all of the world develops some kind of mysticism, therefore there must be some common truth to mysticism. Well, it may just be the case that we all have the same brain, and because we have the same brain, the same hacks are discovered all over the world, and that's not proof of some deeper reality. It could just be proof of the fact that we all share the same brain. So that would be my general sense of it. Also, we're living in the middle of a meaning crisis. We've been living in the midst of a meaning crisis now for quite a while, and I think that anything sufficiently big, like these AIs, people go to them looking for meaning. I mean, the amount of people talking to AIs, chatbots, trying to establish communication, trying to establish relationship, trying to establish meaning. I mean, people having philosophical conversations with chatbots, that's a symptom of a much deeper and much more horrifying crisis in meaning, and crisis in community, and crisis in other things. And so unsurprisingly, when we have this meaning crisis, people are going to try to solve it by combining things like religion and the big thing. And the big thing now are these LLMs. And this is causing people to have AI-induced psychosis and all kinds of stuff, which just sounds horrible. But that would be my guess, is that you mash things up and you see what sticks. And I think that's part of the reason why these sort of things morph into it. All right. Look at that one. What do you think of Gal Sofer's book on the origins of Solomonic grimoires coming from Babylonian incantation bowls? I don't think he says they come directly from it, but incantation bowls. That is one stream that kind of informs the that informs the foundation of Solomonic magic. Will we get syncretic Hebraic Babylonian incantation bowls for sale? No, I'm not going to write another Aramaic. If I don't have to write another Aramaic incantation for the rest of my life, I will die a happy man. It took me forever. I mean, it's one thing to read an ancient language. It's another thing to try to think in that ancient language and then try to write something out that would approximate what you would think would be in that ancient language. And again, my Aramaic is not the best Aramaic in the world. And so trying to like write out an incantation in Aramaic, which luckily the incantation bowl, the Aramaic of the incantation bowls is not terribly literate. So my not terribly literate incantation was probably on the point. So I've only read Dr. Sofer's book really, really quickly. I read it like literally on a plane. I read it really fast. But what he argues, and what it seems to be true to me, is that we don't have a linear connection. We don't have a linear connection through time of Solomonic magic. That seems obvious to me. And if all you have to do is look at all of the various manuscripts of the Clavicula Salomonis, of which I think we know of like 150, and there are probably another 100 out there somewhere too. This is a very disparate manuscript tradition. And so that disparate manuscript tradition probably speaks to the fact that we're looking at disparate things being added and mixed together. And I think I've said this before, is that rather than looking for an Solomonic magic, which I don't think existed, but we should think about grimoires more like cookbooks as a literature than we should think about them as like technical manuals. That a technical manual telling you how to do the one thing, that technical manual telling you how to do the one thing might be a standard book that is passed down and maybe goes through some form of corruption over time, but it's the one book being passed down over and over and over again. Something like Vitruvius or something. But a cookbook is gonna have lots of things cobbled together, and you might have cookbook traditions. And those cookbook traditions, right, will have various kinds of things, except for when they get to printing, of course. But there's going to be a huge amount of this gets added, this gets taken out, this gets edited, this gets changed, this gets moved, this sigils get changed over here, this gets moved, this demon does different stuff or whatever. And so I think that model of a series, it's a network of nodes and modules that becomes what we know of Solomonic magic, seems to me to be much more accurate than the idea that there was a kind of an Solomonic magic that developed somewhere, in Egypt in Hellenistic times and was transmitted to the Hugramentea, and then the Hugramentea jumped over to Italy and became the Clavicula Salomonis. That seems not correct to me. I've never been convinced of that story. So I think that Sofer's point is ultimately right. Now, I think where I might disagree with him is that I do think that we do need a critical edition of the literature. Now, that might look like a sort of a synopsis in the same way that the Hechelet literature doesn't represent a manuscript tradition that's coherent enough, with the exception of Hechelet Rabati, to actually be put into a critical edition. And so what Schaeffer did was make a synopsis where he said all the manuscripts have various things, and this is sort of roughly similar to what is generated. We might need to do that with the Clavicula Salomonis. Now, the challenge with that, of course, is that in the Hechelet literature, we're looking at 50 manuscripts. In the Merkavah, in the Solomonic literature, we're looking at 150 manuscripts minimum. And so I think that a published version of that would run into many volumes, if it's even possible. And secondly, it would be better suited, I think, for like a hyperlink version, like a internet. It'd be better published on the internet actually, because in that way you get to let it be an actual functioning hypertext. So that's my thoughts on So Fair. I want to reread the book. I know that Dr. Puka Angela has just recently done a video on it, and I haven't watched her video, and I'm sure it's great. So I'm sure if folks want a better presentation of it, that's what I would probably look to is Angela's version of it. Yeah, thank you for what you do. Thank you. In my opinion, esotericism is becoming increasingly important with the rapid acceleration of tech. Yeah, I don't know. You know, I think we're kind of in a. I think during COVID there was kind of an upswing in interest in esotericism, which is lucky considering I started this channel accidentally with the onset of COVID. I think that's subsided. I think that's gone down. At least that's what I'm hearing from people who are on the practitioner side of things. And but I wonder if if that wider interest is true, if that is ticking up with tech or something, but I don't know. Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to seeing you speak in Calgary at the AJC conference. Thanks very much for making the trip for us. Yeah, folks, I don't know if folks know this. I may make an announcement on the channel as we get closer to time, but I'll be in Calgary in Alberta giving an address to the Apostolic Johannine Church, sort of the neo-Gnostic church, which is really cool. And I'll be speaking specifically on the development of the divine feminine in Kabbalah, and specifically on the interaction of the divine feminine in 13th century Spain, and how the Marian cult and how the Shekhinah are actually in conversation with one another. When one's very much influencing each other, or certainly the Marian cult is influencing the Zohar. So I'll be talking about the development of the divine feminine in Judaism, and especially how it's taken up into Kabbalah, especially vis-a-vis the Shekhinah as she appears in the Sefer Zohar. So that'll be a really fun talk. Looking forward to hanging out with you guys. Always looking forward to hanging out with Gnostics. So that'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, appreciate you guys having me. It'll be a lot of fun. Also, I've never really seen much of the Rocky Mountains, so it'll be cool to see the Rocky Mountains from the Canadian side, which I've heard, but now I've only heard this from Canadians, but I've heard that the Canadian Rockies are far more beautiful in many ways than what we have down here in America. So I'm looking forward to seeing the Canadian Rockies. Ancient Enochian language does not match between books for the occult philosophy in 1533 from one of the newer books, book 3, page 439, Agrippa Vanity. This is not really a question. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean, Nexus. Maybe you can pipe out a little bit closer what you're asking about in the chat so I can answer you, but I'm not quite sure what you mean here. But thank you for the super sticker. Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. Oh my God. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, folks. Let me grab some other questions if I can that are non would it possible get shirts in an illuminated manuscript style, specifically, or necromantic underground? I don't know. I haven't planned on making any other clerical necromantic underground shirts, but that would be a funny one to do. Do it in sort of a medieval illuminated style way. But we do have clerical necromantic underground shirts on the channel in sort of the typical black metal style that we do here on the merch. So you can check those out. This is a great question. So I've been threatening to do this event at an Esoterica event, kind of an in-person learning event at the Shining Hotel, and that's the Stanley over in Colorado. Yes, I still want to do this, but you know they don't reply to emails. Like I call them and they transfer me and they just don't they're like, I've never actually been able to get in touch with the people responsible for planning this thing. So I need to just call them again and be like, hey, look, I have a relatively big channel on YouTube, which is the pull the creator card is always cringe. Um, but I was like, yeah, I want to host an event thing and like bring people to your hotel and talk about occult stuff. Maybe I'll call them once I get off the live stream. But yes, I do want to have an Esoterica event at the Stanley. I think that would be really cool. It'll be a lot of fun. My brother and I got to go there a couple years ago for Bruce Fest, which was this sort of celebration of Bruce Campbell, who I grew up with as one of my sort of like guys that I loved growing up with Evil Dead and stuff. So it was really cool to hang out with Bruce Campbell and other folks. Like we got to look at a copy of Agrippa's 3 Books on Occult Philosophy together. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, I do want to do something at the Stanley. Also, I'm going to be planning to do an event at Boleskine House. The details are still forthcoming. We're still working out, all the stuff, but what I've pitched and what the folks at Boleskine House are interested in, the foundation, we might be able to do it, is an Esoterica event where we do an in-depth sort of boot camp of the Zohar, just the Zohar, in terms of studying Kabbalah. Because I feel like the Zohar is one of the texts that, while many occult folks know some Kabbalah, they don't know Zohar very well. And I love Zohar, and it would be really cool to do an in-depth, intensive course on the Zohar at Boleskine House. So that might happen. It's in the plans, but we'll see if it really comes to pass. But hopefully. What do you think causes glossolalia? This is what we often refer to as speaking in tongues. Why do we see artificial languages as inherently esoteric and mystical and angelic? I think that the brain, they've done a lot of studies of glossolalia in the brain, and we can kind of know in the brain what's causing it. Also, it's one of those things where, interestingly enough, that if you practice at it, you get better at doing it. So it is a skill that one can acquire, and is a skill that one can get better at. I think that speech in general is very strange. I mean, one of the most famous magical incantations is abracadabra, and kind of butchered Aramaic-ish. I create as I speak. And I think we have I think that it is a thing that we find interesting about ourselves. Speech has incredible power, and we attribute magical power to speech in general. So it's unsurprising that we would attribute an even more numinous quality to speech that seems to be derived from a supernatural source, God, angels, whatever. So I think that's the reason why. And often people experience glossolalia, or they perform glossolalia in an altered state of consciousness, in a profoundly altered state of consciousness. And I think that is sort of the shamanic kind of, you're in some sense transported or possessed, or you're moved you're in an ecstatic state. And therefore we put a lot of meaning on the kind of utterances that one performs in those ecstatic states. So I think this is the reason why we find glossolalia. One, we find it cross-culturally, and two, we find it having often associated with some degree of supernatural power. What's interesting, though, is that in the Enochian language, the language that was revealed to John Dee and Edward Kelly, or that Kelly made up, or whatever theory you want to go with it, is that we do not see glossolalia in that session. That the language that's revealed to Kelly and Dee is not glossolalia, but it is in fact has grammar, has syntax, has conjugations, declensions, and all that sort of stuff. So that's an interesting place where we would expect to see glossolalia, but it actually doesn't show up. So, but thank you for the question. All right, I'm going to get a couple more questions here. You a pour over French press or a me coffee type brewer? So I am a I just drink it like a what is it called? Freeze dried coffee. What is it called? Instant coffee. So yeah, I drink instant coffee. I'm a complete Philistine when it comes to coffee. On the weekends, I will make a French press sometimes. I do like French press coffee on the weekends, but my go-to favorite coffee is just espresso. I love drinking espresso. I think it's the best coffee that we can. If I get a wild hair, I'll make a bricca. Like I have a bricca that I'll use to make sort of home style espresso coffee, and also like Turkish coffee. In fact, when I came back from Egypt last year, when I came home, I was drinking a lot more Turkish coffee. I think you should get back into that because I do like Turkish coffee a lot. But day to day, Nescafe. I'm completely boring in that way. Do I have a personal faith? As much as I have a faith, yeah, I follow Judaism. I follow the Judaism, the Reconstructionist Judaism that was developed by Mordecai Kaplan of blessed memory. He's my Rebbe. In fact, I even have the most recent biography of him just sitting right here. Just came out just recently. So this is a recent biography of basically the guy who developed the Judaism that I take seriously. So, but would I consider myself atheist? I don't know. Again, I think the term I use is post-theist. I definitely don't want to be associated with atheists because I find most of them insufferable. Um, but yeah. Advice for effective language learning. I did a whole video about this. I did a great interview with Luke Rainieri, who's one of the premier sort of polyglots online. And the piece of advice that he gave, which I think is absolutely correct, is that you should treat learning any language as if it's a living language, whether it's Sumerian, whether it's Coptic, whether it's Latin or whatever. Treat every language that you're working on as a living language. So learn to speak the language, learn the phonology, learn how to think in that language, and you will learn it far better than grammar grinding. Grammar grinding I don't think it works. I was subjected to it repeatedly in high school and in college, and I will say that I learned the languages, but I think that now that I've switched over to doing learning languages the way that Luke advises, I find that I acquire them a lot faster with a lot more depth. So yeah, check out my video on learning ancient languages where I have a conversation with Luke Rainieri, the channel Polymathy, and yeah, that'd be my advice. All right. You've talked about the Picatrix in various videos due to its importance, but I don't think you've ever dedicated a video on it. Do you ever plan to make a Picatrix video? So I've never done a video on the Picatrix, mostly because Dr. Dana Trail, the modern hermeticist, has done already really great content on the Picatrix. That's a bad reason. I probably should, be a good reason to work with Dan on making an episode. Maybe we can team up and do an episode on Picatrix together. Dan Trail, the modern hermeticist, was part of the team of folks that translated, did the academic translation of Picatrix. So that's a good piece of advice. So yeah, I should come back and do one on Picatrix. Maybe I'm scared of Dan judging me when I do the episode, but yeah, I should do one. What advice can you give someone that wants to write professionally about philosophy and religion but doesn't have the means and time to study in college or get a PhD? That's a great question. So the first piece of writing advice that I give everybody is this is from Erasmus. Erasmus said, "Don't write so clearly that you can be understood. Write clearly enough that you can't be misunderstood." Right? Don't write. It's not enough to write so clearly that you're understood. You have to write so clearly that you can't be misunderstood. So that's a piece of advice I got from Erasmus, and that piece of advice has guided me for many years, right? How do you write so clearly that you can't be misunderstood? And that's very difficult. The other piece of advice I would give you is that you're going to write like the people you read. You're going to write like the people you read. So if you're reading a bunch of Levinas or Derrida, you're going to write like that. And you're going to write like a bad version of that, which is even worse. So what you need to do is be reading the things that you want to be writing. So if you want to write professionally about philosophy and religion, you need to look at academic journals about philosophy and religion. You need to look at published books in the field that are done by reputable publishers. You need to learn, especially the subfield that you want to work in. So if you want to work in analytic metaphysics, you need to go look in, Noose and other books of analytic metaphysics, and look how they write, and begin to read the way they write, begin to read what they do, and you'll write like they write. So at first you'll do it poorly, you'll ape their style, and you'll eventually get your own voice. But that is my advice, to ultimately to read the material that you want to be working in, and get in it. And once you do, you'll begin to write the way that they write. The other piece of advice I guess I would follow is style sheets. Look up whatever field you want to work in, right? If you want to work in, Western esotericism, go pull up the Brill style sheet. And again, I always throw shade at Brill because they're thieves. But look at their style sheet. Brill has a really great style sheet that's available to you. It's on their website, and that'll also give you a sense of how they expect you to write, how they expect you to format things, how they expect you to lay things out. I find their style sheet to be really, really good. So check out their style sheet, or the Chicago style sheet, or whatever. So whatever one you want to like. But yeah, that's my advice mostly is learn to write clearly, and learn to write like the people that you admire. And you'll ape them at first, but then you will get your own voice. Thank you for the super sticker. Ouroboros. I like this. It sounds like the way that my child would say Ouroboros. Thank you. Greetings from the bowling alleys of Albuquerque. Wow. Have you read any of Pierre Hadot? I enjoyed his work on Plotinus. Yeah, it's super famous work on Plotinus, and was thinking about reading his work on Marcus Aurelius. So the major thing that I've read of Pierre Hadot, which has been a long time ago, was some of the stuff on Plotinus, and also his analysis on ancient philosophy. Because Hadot reminds us of the most important thing about ancient philosophy was that ancient philosophy wasn't what we do now in philosophy. What we do now in philosophy is a profession. That is to say, it's a job. You go to an office, you teach classes, you do research, and you write papers, and you go and present those papers, and you publish books. That's a job, and it's a job that you do. Pierre Hadot makes it really clear that what ancient philosophers were doing was not that. They were developing a way of life, and they were living that life. They were living a philosophical life, and that what mattered to them was how they lived, and philosophy was the way that they lived. And I think that point, while in some sense it should be obvious, it's completely lost on modern philosophy. Modern philosophy is a job, and I think that Pierre Hadot makes the point that philosophy for the ancients is a way of life. And I will say that one of my great disappointments in life, and I've had many great disappointments in life, but one of my greatest disappointments in life was having steeped myself as an autodidact in the world of philosophy, reading philosophy in high school, reading it not in college, and then even in undergrad, really being allowed at some level to kind of live a philosophical life in some sense. And then by the time I got to graduate school, they're like, yeah, you can't do that. That's that's not really a thing. You need to get a job. Like, philosophy is a job. Like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And there was something so, I don't know, heartbreaking, really just like soul crushing, to the point where I just didn't want to have anything to do with academia anymore. Where what was clear to me was the point that Hadot had made, but I was already living that way in some sense, only to be smashed into the wall of the professionalization of philosophy, which to my mind is the death of philosophy. It's the murder of thought. And so it was terribly crushing to find this out. But yeah, Pierre Hadot, I need to go back and read him. I remember his works on Plotinus that I read when I was late in undergraduate. But I think that this point about philosophy as a way of life was a thing that, like, I remember reading later on in life and being like, yeah, that guy got it. Why can't the rest of us get it? And I know the answer to that. And the answer to that is, you got to eat. But at any rate, yeah, a great sad moment in my life when I realized that philosophy as a way of life was effectively dead in the academy. And that was ultimately pointing me in the direction of getting the hell out of there. All right. Do you have any thoughts or reading recommendations on how theistic belief is different in contemporary religions from ancient sources? A good answer is did ancients believe in their gods? Question. This is a great question. I don't know of anything off the top of my head in terms of ancient religious anthropology. Um, I imagine that ancient people believed in their gods in the same way that most people probably believe in gods now. They're kind of they're in the background, and you call them when you need them, but otherwise you just go through the normal rigmarole of living. But no, I don't have any great thoughts or any great sources to read on this. I kind of think of the Stoics and Plato and other people. I have Plato in the mind a lot recently. Is that clearly Plato had some belief in the gods, but back behind that was a commitment to a certain kind of monism. And I think that probably many people had some similar kind of belief, was that there were gods, that is to say deities, but back behind it all, there's sort of one thing. And you see this in Plotinus, you see it in the Hermetica, right? Often sometimes people think that monism and polytheism can't exist together, but they can exist perfectly fine together. There's nothing metaphysically contradictory between being monist and being polytheist. I mean, you can ask the Hindus; they do it all day, every day. So that's my first belief. Is that my first thinking is that there was kind of a monistic polytheism that operated. But and again, you see people acclimate their philosophy to their philosophical system. I'm thinking of something like Cleanthes when his hymn to Zeus, where we have Stoic metaphysics being interpreted through the lens of the Olympian gods. And so that's an interesting kind of religious anthropology as well. But a specific book about this, and nothing jumps to mind, but there has to be something. If anyone knows in the chat, please throw it in. All right. What are my thoughts on Žižek, Slavoj Žižek? He has some interesting things to say about religion. I find his position on Christian atheism to be really interesting. I love Žižek. I don't always agree with him. But I think when he's right, he's right. It's sad. I actually reached out to him once because I wanted to have a conversation with him about Adorno and occultism and the Frankfurt School, and he wrote back and told me, "No, I'm too sick and old to do that," which I think is his stock reply to anyone who he just wants to say no to. But I know Alex O'Connor also recently to talk with Slavoj Žižek. Yeah, I'd love to do that. It'd be great to talk with him about Adorno and the occult. But no, I find that he's deeply insightful. We come from the same school of thought. We came from this sort of Marxist, Hegelian, Lacanian world, so we speak the same language. I see eye to eye with Žižek a lot. I love his sense of humor. Yeah, I think we're cut from similar cloths. Although I'm much less entertaining than Slavoj is. So, but yeah, it's great stuff. If I could restart my academic career, is there anything you would do differently? What advice would you give someone who wants to join in academia in fields like religion? I think the only major thing I probably would have changed is I wouldn't have gone. So when I finished my degree in Amsterdam in esotericism, I should have gone to the University of Groningen in the Netherlands and stayed there and done religion. I think it was a mistake to jump over to philosophy, although I'm perfectly happy to have gotten the philosophical education that I did. So I think I would have changed that. What advice would I give to someone who wants to go into academia? Don't. Or rather, what I would say is, if they give you a check, take it. Don't go into any program unless they're funding you, for sure. And don't expect a job. They don't exist. Just pretty much don't exist. So if you can do it and you can survive while doing it financially, just do it for the love of it. Do it for the love of the game, but don't expect anything on the other side of it. Expect to go back into a job market that is the same job market that you would have done without the PhD. So in general, I don't advise people to get advanced degrees, especially if you think the advanced degree is going to result in you getting an academic position, which statistically you won't. So I know that sounds bleak, but I'd rather tell you the truth than like smoke and mirrors. Yeah, it's all rosy out there. It's a nightmare out there. So that's my general idea. Will there be more Lilith incantation bowls for sale? Yes. I don't know when. Probably maybe toward the end of the year. We'll do another couple batches of the incantation bowls. So, yep, I want to do some more of those. Those are great. People seem to like them, and it's a neat kind of recreation from history. Yeah, I would love, Dan and I hung out in when I was over in Provo at Reed's. Dan came over and we hung out for a little bit, and we also hung out a little bit at the AAR in Boston. Dan McClellan's a great guy. So yeah, I'd love to hang out with Dan some more. He's a fantastic scholar. Really appreciate him and all he does. And so yeah, love to hang out with Dan. I'd love to be on the podcast. I think we talked about me coming on there maybe and talking about the Zohar or something. So yeah, if you got Dan's ear, remind him that I'd love to come on to Date Over Dogma and talk about Kabbalah or what have you. But yeah, Dan's a great guy. All right, get some more questions. Doing an undergrad research project on Catharism next semester. Any advice for where to start? Yeah, I have 3 or 4 episodes on the Cathars. I would check those out. They all have pretty elaborate reading lists if you want to get started in studying the Cathars or the debate about whether the Cathars really existed or not, which I think is fascinating. So if you want to get into Cathar studies, check out my videos on the Cathars and make sure to look in the description for the reading list. And I have all really reliable reading lists of text on the Cathars. What I will say is I get to be really careful. This thing with the Templars is that there's so much like weird garbage about the Cathars and the Templars that it's wrapped up in this weird Mary Magdalene and went to Spain or some stuff. So there's a bunch of like conspiracy garbage about them. So you have to be pretty careful about what you read. But I have a pretty good list of Cathar studies documents in those episodes. So check out those. All right, let me see. Yeah, I'd like to hear more on Swedenborg. Yeah, the Swedenborg Church in New York sent me a collected works of Swedenborg, heavily discounted, which was really kind of them. And so yeah, I'd love to do some more work on Swedenborg. I would like to cover Heaven and Hell, and really Swedenborg represents the very like upper limit of the kind of work that I do historically. But I think before doing Swedenborg, I want to do more on Jakob Böhme and Theosophy, and that's going to require me reading Aurora. Which, if you've ever tried to read Aurora, you'll know that that's just like esotericism beast mode. And so I need to do episodes on Jakob Böhme and specifically on the Aurora. And I think once I cover that stuff, then I can turn to Swedenborg. So do that later. Actually, I think I want to stand up. Look at this crazy desk, y'all. I have this great standing desk where I can just like, I can just stand up in the middle of a live stream. Isn't that daisy? So, all right. So let's take a look at some more questions before I still have about an hour left. Is there a specific time period where esoteric beliefs evolved most dramatically? I would say that in the Hellenistic period, they evolved really dramatically quickly. In the Renaissance, they obviously evolved really quickly, and in the 20th century, huge evolution in 19th to 20th century between Theosophy and everything Crowley, Wicca, chaos magic, all that. So those are periods I would say they're marked by pretty rapid changes in the world of esotericism. Maimonides is probably too mainstream by this general standard, but he famously employed an esoteric reading of the Torah. Well, that's certainly what Strauss says. There's debate about that, which split the theological community. What are my thoughts on Maimonides? This is a great question. Yeah, I should do I should do an episode on Strauss's concept of esoteric writing. And specifically, the example he gives is Maimonides, and there's a big debate to what degree Maimonides is sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, putting stuff in there. And of course, we there seems to be cases where he is dissimulating, and Maimonides even tells us he's dissimulating. So yeah, there'd be a great topic to write on, a great episode to write on esoteric writing, and use Maimonides as an example of that, and really lean into the Strauss stuff to see whether that's true. But that's a great question. And yeah, who doesn't love Maimonides, the great eagle? So that's a great idea. Can you go over again what you said about getting a PhD for the love of the game because you won't find a job? What PhD you're referring to? Getting a PhD in the humanities, period. Whether you're getting a PhD in English, or you're getting a PhD in religious studies, or you're getting a PhD in philosophy, I would say if you're going to get the PhD, get it because you just want to get a PhD. Get it because you love the research. Get it because you want to do some teaching. Get it because you really want to get into doing it. You want to go to conferences. You want to do all the stuff. Do it for those reasons. Do not do it because you think you're going to get a job, because there just aren't jobs. Unless you are the tiny 1% of people that gets a PhD in philosophy from Harvard or NYU or something, you're not going to find a job, not statistically speaking. And so do it because you just want to do all the things. You just want to live. You want to like cosplay as an academic for 5 years. And as long as they pay you to cosplay as an academic, great. But when it's done, it's done. And the odds of you getting a job on the end of that spectrum are basically non-existent. I mean, I think of Dr. Angela Puka is a great example of this. Of all the people I know who have done everything you're supposed to do to get an academic position, I mean, she's published in the most prestigious publishing houses. You know, Brill. She's published numerous articles. She goes to all these conferences. She does everything you're supposed to do to get a permanent academic job. He's not given one. It's insulting. I find it insulting to her that she has not got a permanent academic posting, and she's done everything you're supposed to do. That shows you that even if you do everything, it does not necessarily result in you getting a job. So again, if you're going to do academia, do it for the love of the game. Cosplay as an academic for 5 years while you collect a paycheck, and then move on to something else. Start a YouTube channel. All right, I'll get a couple more questions, a few more. What is that on the shelf behind me? Yeah, that's Agrippa. He's over there. And John D. And the water thing is, yeah, my autoverser. It's a thing for serving absinthe. A little drip, drip, drip seesaw buoy for serving absinthe. So yeah, a lot of stuff you see on the set behind me is stuff you see in the openings of Esoterica videos. Stuart, it's good to see you. Stuart's a fantastic guy, guys. I got to have had the distinct pleasure of meeting Stuart a couple times. He's also one of the trustees at Boleskine House. So have your thoughts on the dates and the origins of the Abramelin altered at all since your last video? This is a great question because I go back and forth about what I think about the Abramelin. You know, I think that the text is not medieval. It doesn't strike me as a medieval text. I think it is early modern. So I think it's, early modern. But I think that the core of it represents at least a memory of pretty ancient Jewish magic. And I've made this argument before that I think that the Abramelin as a ritual is downstream of the Sartora praxis. And if it's downstream of the Sartora praxis, that could put us back into medieval Germany, right? That could put us back into the days of the Chasti Ashkenaz and Eliezer Worms and the Kalonymus family and all that stuff. So that's my sort of general thinking, is that there is an ancient core or an old core, but the text as we have it, the Abramelin as we have it, is an early modern text. And probably not one text. I think it's several texts that have been cobbled together. I think the main core ritual of what book 3 is probably not really related to the kind of magic in book 2. And the story, the bookend, the very first book, the narrative part is probably tacked on to all of it to tie it all together. Um, that's my general thinking. I'm sure that will change. So, but we'll see. All right. This is interesting. Do you think Jewish authors invented post-structuralism before the European philosophers did? Somehow Walter Benjamin's Arcades project seems to echo the way that Jewish mysticism, Jewish mystical texts are written. I don't know if I wouldn't go so far as to say post-structuralism, because I think post-structuralism is answering a very specific set of deficiencies that came out of structuralism. I think they were wrong, because I think structuralism is the best thing since sliced bread. But I think that what you may be referring to is the sort of hypertextuality of Jewish texts, which, by the way, isn't unique to Jewish texts. European legal texts are also incredibly hypertextual. When you look at something like the Decretals by Gratian, that's a hypertext as well. But I think that there's sort of a kind of hypertextuality that is a huge part of what we recognize as postmodernism or post-structuralism, and definitely Jewish texts relish in that. They're sort of self-aware that they're texts or something. They break the fourth wall and things like that. And in that way, I think that Benjamin is probably part of that core. Also, the style that Benjamin writes in, this is true of Adorno and Horkheimer too, if you read the Dialectics of Enlightenment. Those texts, they're written in the 30s. Those could easily be written in the 60s, stylistically. So I think it has to do with that too. But I don't know to what degree Benjamin had a formal Jewish education. I know he and Gershom Scholem hung out together. There's correspondence between them. But my buddy Morgan, who's also my business partner in the book business, is an expert in Benjamin. So this would be a great question for him. So I'll ask him. Another question. From what I've learned in Judaism, there is no afterlife as opposed to other religion. Is it hard for you to know that there is nothing else? I mean, Judaism definitely has concepts of an afterlife. I think that what's different from Judaism and maybe some other religions is that there is no dogmatic conception of afterlife. Reincarnation's on the table if you're a Kabbalist. The world to come is on the table. There's Gehenna. I think that what the rabbis do is basically keep the gate open to various possibilities of what happens in an afterlife. And of course, there's the old Israelite idea of Sheol, which is kind of like a, gray, gloomy, Hades-like realm of inactivity. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that Judaism has no concept of an afterlife. It definitely does. I just think that it's much less of a dogmatic understanding of the afterlife. And certainly a much less dogmatic understanding of what happens, the relation of what happens here to afterlife. So, but yeah, I think it's not quite right to say that there's no conception of afterlife. Favorite black metal bands: Wolves in the Throne Room, Panopticon, Abigail Williams, Krallis. I haven't been listening to a lot of black metal recently, actually. Those are some that come most immediately to mind. Would I consider Hildegard an intellectual? Yeah, this is an interesting question. Not really, no. I mean, Hildegard, one of the things that she brags about constantly is how unlearned she is. And of course, this is a humble brag. But she often will brag about the fact that she's just an unlearned woman, and she uses that kind of as proof for her visions. In fact, there's an argument that's made. Bernard McGinn even makes this argument, which is somewhat interesting, is that Hildegard's not even a mystic. Hildegard is a visionary, and she's a prophet, and that visionaries and prophets are different than mystics. Hildegard never claims unity with God. She never claims that. She never, the whole erotic unity with Jesus stuff that you see later on in the Bechines, Hildegard never goes that direction. And Bernard McGinn makes the argument that she's not even a mystic. And this is an interesting argument because usually we think of people who have visions as being mystically inclined. But, if you take union with God or experiencing the direct apperception of the presence of God as constitutive of mysticism the way that Bernard McGinn does, then interestingly enough, Hildegard doesn't fit the bill. Right? She doesn't fit the bill. She becomes more of a visionary than a mystic. And I think that that's right. I think that that's correct. Strictu sensu, right? Now, categories are only ever useful. They're never true. And so it's a particularly weird thing if we develop a theory of mysticism that doesn't capture Hildegard of Bingen. That's a very strange thing that's just happened. And so, so that's, I think, a particularly weird thing about Bernard McGinn's definition. This is also true of the rejected knowledge version of Western esotericism. One of the bones of contention that I've had with my teacher about Hanegraaff is that the rejected knowledge way of understanding what Western esotericism is doesn't capture mysticism. It doesn't really capture Kabbalah. Because Kabbalah was never rejected knowledge, not really in Judaism. It's just basically mainline Jewish theology at this point. And it's a particularly strange thing that if one's theory of Western mysticism, Western esotericism doesn't include Christian mysticism or Kabbalah, that's a peculiar outcome. It's a conspicuous outcome. So, but at any rate, would I consider Hildegard intellectual? No, she doesn't consider herself intellectual. But even would I even consider her a mystic? Well, Bernard McGinn makes a compelling argument that we can't even consider her as a mystic, which is conspicuously weird. Conspicuously weird. You get to resurrect one source that we know of. You get the original, no scribal errors. You get everything the source wrote. What do you choose? Oh, wow. It's a great question. What would I want to resurrect? What text would I want to resurrect from the past? It's so hard to say. I don't think it'd be an esoteric source. I think it would be... I wish we had more of Zosimus's writings. I feel like Zosimus would be great to have his writings. Probably something by Chrysippus, actually. I really wish his work on physics survived, or his work on logic survived, something like that. Yeah, it probably wouldn't be an esoteric work specifically. It'd probably be one of these works. It would be really great to get a complete copy of the Book of Thoth, the Demotic Book of Thoth, one that's not so fragmentary. That would be really cool to recover that. There's a great line or a great scribal note at the end of the collection of Hermetic literature found in the Nag Hammadi library, where the scribe says, "Well, I picked these things out, but I could have sent you a lot more, but I didn't want to bother you with a lot of other books." And we know that there were a bunch of other Hermetic books out there that did not survive, and I always wish that scribe would have sent more. So that's what comes to mind most specifically, is that, I would love to see more. I'd love to have seen more Chrysippus survive. Maybe the thing that I would say that I would love to have survived, and maybe just because I'm on a Plato kick right now, is I would love to have seen Plato's discourses, right? Plato's discourses, which are actually his systematic documents detailing his philosophy, don't survive. They probably existed. They were only circulated inside of the academy. We have his dialogues, or some of his dialogues, but none of his discourses. The opposite's true of Aristotle. We don't have any of Aristotle's dialogues. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen what the secret teachings of Plato look like, because I do think that those are hugely important. But sadly, they are lost, and they're probably not ever going to be found. But that's a great question. So any plans to make a video about Cleopatra the Alchemist? Yes, I already made an episode. Yeah, I have a whole episode on Cleopatra the Alchemist. So just like go on YouTube and look for an episode on Cleopatra, and you will find that I've already made an episode about her. All right. Do I think the Kabbalah is valid? Do I think that it makes logically consistent claims, propositional claims? Well, yeah, probably not. But do I think Kabbalah is like a valid way of orienting one's spirituality? Sure. Lots of people out there practicing Kabbalists. I'm not one of them, but yeah. Opinion of the Berg translation of the Zohar. It is defective. I would not trust it. I think if you want to get a copy of the Zohar, you should certainly get a copy of the Pritzker done by Daniel Matt et al. That's the one I would go to. I would not trust the Kabbalah Center's translation of the Zohar not for a minute. All right. Follow-up question on languages. I keep running into, for Hebrew, step 1, learn the alphabet. Step 2, read the Hebrew Bible. Yeah, that's definitely not what you want to do. You learn to read the Hebrew Bible by learning the grammar of the Hebrew Bible and learning to think in the grammar of Hebrew. If you look at my reading list that I put in the description of most of my videos, I give you a recommendation of what I think is the best book for learning Hebrew. And that's Paige Kelly's textbook of learning Hebrew. And I think it's great because from the very first lesson, you are reading Bible in Hebrew. But yeah, the only way to learn to do Hebrew is just to begin reading it, and you begin reading it by learning the grammar and vice versa. So yeah, check out my book, my study guide, and check a look at the section on languages, and there's a section there on Hebrew. Going to Everness and reading the Zohar sounds like the start of a horror movie. It could be. I think that. I mean, it's sort of funny. I wonder what if the Loch Ness monster will come, or the ghost of Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley wouldn't come because Aleister Crowley couldn't. He wouldn't stand to actually systematically study the Zohar. But it would be a fun. I think it would be fun. I think it would be a lot of fun. Thank you. What resources did you use to learn video production, editing, audio, etc.? I'm an ex-academic that would love to adapt scholarship into video form. YouTube tutorials. Lots and lots and lots of YouTube tutorials. Also, I just happened to be friends with a great guy who runs a video production company, and so he helped me with setting up the camera and framing things and all the stuff that goes into that. And also, I'm really good friends with Andy over at Atun Shea Films. He's also a filmmaker, and so he helped me out with a lot of that stuff. But yeah, hire like a video production crew guy. Find someone who works for video production, hire them as a consultant, bring them in for just a couple of hours to kind of show you the ropes, and then lots of YouTube tutorials. So that's what I would do. So if you want to key in your lighting or key in your audio, learn what to get, there are 1,000 really good tutorials on YouTube for getting into how to do all this. And I will be the first to admit, I don't know what I'm doing at all when it comes to the production quality stuff. I am totally like, when I key in the specific stuff in my camera, it just stays like that because I don't understand any of that stuff. So I could do a lot better at understanding how it all works. I'm sure I could dial in the quality of everything a lot better. In fact, one of the things I want to do is get the audio of the channel a little better. And in fact, I might be talking with Philip Holmes' wife, who is a sound designer. That's her job. Like, she's really good at sound design. So I might be talking with her to get some consulting there. So yeah, getting some consulting under your belt when it comes to this stuff will certainly help. Because again, I don't know what I'm doing. When will there be a course about the chemical wedding? Soon, actually. I need to make a second part of my series on Rosicrucianism. So yeah, I need to do an episode on the chemical wedding. So yeah, that'll happen sometime this year. Yeah, that'll happen sometime this year. That's a good question. Do you think that YouTube infantilizes or oversimplifies academia in a way that risks exacerbating the Dunning-Kruger effect? How do we square the rigor of academia with the casualness of YouTube? This is a great question, and this is a question I struggle with all the time. And the short answer for me, at least, is I don't doubt my audience. I make content dialed in to the level of rigor that I think is appropriate, that maximizes, sort of gives me a Pareto efficiency between academic rigor and accessibility. And I keep that standard and I don't change it. You know, I get comments all the time for people saying things like, hey, can you, you know, make this video, but like dumb it down? Or can you make this video more easy? Or can you make this video a short 5 minutes? And I'm like, no. And my audience rises to the occasion, because when you don't doubt your audience and you don't insult your audience's intelligence, difficult stuff, if they really want to learn it, they'll stop the video and they'll Google whatever, the Hildegard of Bingen, or they'll Google whatever this word is. And what I found that the audience that I have rises to the occasion every single time. And even when I pump out extremely obscure and difficult turgid topics like Duns Scotus or formalizing Parmenides, is everybody getting all of that? Probably not. But it is raising the bar, I think, on this in a way that's the commitment that that's the commitment I've made, is that I'm dialed my information in to a certain degree, and I'm not going to compromise on that, and I'm not going to simplify things that can't be simplified. And I think that is what I do. And I think that's what other YouTubers, at least the ones that I hang around, do as well. So I think the answer is respect your audience. You know, respect your audience's intelligence and expect them to rise to the occasion of difficult material, as opposed to making less rigorous material and spoon feeding them stuff. I don't think that's, I don't want to do that. Are you in any relationship? Yes, I am in a marriage. I am married to an amazing lady. Yeah, we love very much. So very much in a relationship. In fact, our 10-year anniversary is this year. My goodness, we've been married 10 years. It's been fantastic years. Fantastic years. And again, some of the best years of my life. Yeah, any plans to cover more Mesoamerican content? I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. You know, I have to be careful venturing out into stuff that I'm not an expert in, and I have to rely on other people's expertise. But it's a topic that I find eternally interesting. I was just down in Ekbalam with Zevi from Seekers of Unity over this winter. So yeah, I'd love to do more stuff on Aztec stuff and on Mayan stuff. So yep, I'd like to do that. I just have to be careful again because it's not my expertise, and so I really, you know, want to do that stuff in a way that's respectful to those civilizations. And I think the way you be respectful to those civilizations is to learn very deeply, and you show that respect by representing them accurately. And I'd rather, yeah, I'd only do it if I could do it in that way. All right. Just retired. Congratulations. Congratulations. Mazal tov. $5,000 a month. It's enough to live. Because I'm 53, I would like to do something with my life. However, I don't even know what I like anymore. What would you advise me to start looking? Oh, I don't even know. I don't know. I think the way to do that is sort of look at the books that you read last year. Go back and look at all the books you read last year and kind of ask yourself, what is the common thread uniting them? And I bet that whatever the common thread uniting them is, assuming there's just one, I'm sure there's many, but I'm pretty sure your heart's somewhere in there. It's in the nexus of all the things that did that brought you to those books. So, and sometimes I think this is an important thing for anyone to do, is sort of take an inventory of the things that you're reading and kind of ask yourself, what rule am I following that has led me to these books, or to these shows, or to this genre, or whatever. So that's what I would do. Take an inventory of what you've been reading for the past year or two, and see what the common core is, and then yeah, dig down a little deeper into that common core and see what comes out. But many congratulations on your retirement. I will never retire, I don't think. Um, but I wish you the very best, and I wish you I wish you the greatest adventure in your retirement. You certainly deserve it. All right, I'm looking down. Yeah, I just mentioned the Zohar. If you're going to be reading the Zohar, read it in the Pritzker edition. I think it's put out by Yale, and by translation by Daniel Matt, with the exception of the last couple of volumes. That's the only one I would recommend. All right, folks, I'm just scrolling through and looking at some of the questions. What's your take on Fraser's Golden Bough? A fantastic work of scholarship that is now basically worthless for scholarship. I would say that it's interesting. Sort of, Fraser gets some things right that I think modern scholarship has forgotten. For instance, there was a whole period of time where people said things like there are no rising and dying gods. This was like a very common thing to hear in like the 2000s or something. And Fraser famously developed this idea of dying and rising gods. And clearly there are dying and rising gods. I don't understand how in the world this sort of weird deconstruction of dying and rising gods came from in like the 90s or 2000s or something. But clearly there are dying and rising gods in lots of religions. Osiris and Dionysius and all this stuff. Orpheus, whatever, Jesus. And so the Golden Bough is decisively important, but it's also completely outdated. So it's the kind of thing that you can study, but almost very little of it applies anymore to modern scholarship. But I think Fraser gets some things right that contemporary scholars have inverted and gotten wrong for whatever reason. So take that for what it's worth. Take that for what it's worth. All right. All right, so a question about that. Do you recommend reading Mordecai Kaplan? So Mordecai Kaplan, folks, is the rabbi that I follow, developed the form of the stream of Judaism that I follow. I mean, if you're Jewish, maybe. I can't imagine why in the world you would have a dog in the fight or a horse in the race otherwise. I say that, and I also say that there's a book I'm going to write. I don't know when I'm going to write it, but I want to apply Kaplanian Reconstructionism to religion more generally. I think Kaplan's point was made well about Judaism, but I think the point actually can be made about religion and spirituality more generally. Now, I'm not going to say a lot more about what that means because I want to write it in my book, but I think that there's a reconstructivist approach to religion, and there's a reconstructivist approach to the occult, actually, to esotericism. And so I kind of want to write Kaplan's famous book, Judaism as a Civilization. I want to write a version of that book applied to esotericism more broadly. So that's an idea. Need to talk to an agent. Have I done an episode on the Bogomils already? I have not. I do need to do one. In fact, I actually need to wrap up my series on the Cathars. There's at least one more episode on the Cathars that I want to make, but yes, I do need to do an episode on the Bogomils. So yeah, that's a great question and something I am going to do. All right. 1 second. Check something real fast. Just looking for something real fast, folks. Sorry. Oops. All right. 1 second. All right. Sorry, I just had to check something really fast before I get back into the chat. Oh, it's my Torah portion, Kitisa. Kitisa. The one with Belial, which is my Hebrew name. And in fact, that's part of why I picked why I ended up with that name. So, Kitisa. All right. Let's see. Some other. Thank you for the kind words. Really appreciate that. All right, folks, just scrolling through, looking at the questions. It's a good one. How much of the Solomonic magical corpus comes from antiquity versus medieval pseudepigrapha? How far back does the notion that Solomon commune with demons actually go? I mean, it goes back at least to the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? So we have mentions of exorcisms specifically mentioning Solomon that go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which means that the audio was current at that time. The Testament of Solomon is pretty early, early period of the Common Era. And there's some mention of Solomon in the Incantation Bowls. So my sense is that Solomonic magic, the corpus of it, at least as we know it, probably goes back to late medieval Jewish magic. At least in large part, it goes back to late medieval Jewish magic. And again, this is a position laid out by Gal Sofel, and so I would check out his book on Solomonic magic for more. But yeah, I think basically he's right about that. So it's good. You have a good disclosure policy on the edges of your topics where your expertise or the bounds of a YouTube video end and personal research on the viewer side would have to begin. Yeah, I tried to. I mean, I try to make it such that I don't do a lot of personal speculation on the channel. I mean, I'm happy to do that on a live stream, for instance. I'm happy to speculate to the end of the earth on a live stream. But when I'm covering a specific topic, I much prefer to lay out what I take to be the consensus of scholarship, and so and leave my own voice out of it, unless there's a really good reason or I have some very specific expertise that allows me to intrude into the conversation. For instance, if I'm working on John Dee stuff, I'm an expert in John Dee stuff. I know that stuff very well. I know Agrippa very well, so I'm happy to put my nose into the conversation when I think it's appropriate. It's just often not appropriate. And so I try not to editorialize on my channel when I'm doing content, but on a live stream, I'll editorialize all day long. So be great to learn from your discussion arcane and esoteric metaphors in connection with quantum physics. Would you do a video on that? No, it's contemporary stuff. Also, Dr. Angela Puka has done a great job on so-called quantum mysticism. I don't have a lot of patience for it. I think it's rubbish. So anytime I hear quantum, if someone starts talking about quantum mechanics and there's not a lot of math I don't understand or bracket notation, then I quit paying attention. But no, I don't think that. Almost every conversation I've ever heard that links quantum mechanics with mysticism almost inevitably misunderstands both quantum mechanics and mysticism, and doesn't have basic understandings of quantum mechanics, and like the fact that quantum effects don't occur at Newtonian scales, period. Um, so so stuff like that. So I find those metaphors to be badly informed and dangerous, which is a bad combination. Um, all right, let me see a couple more questions before I have to get going. What could be a common thread linking UFO phenomena and human interactions with spirits? My sense of it is that basically it's the same thing. I think that we traded demons and angels for aliens in the 1950s. Um, and my guess is that the process of secularization, as much as it happened, just meant that a lot of these spirits and stuff like that a lot of those traits got transferred over to aliens. So, um, so I think that that's um, basically what I think happened. So, because I don't think that extraterrestrials have ever visited here. I don't think they ever will. I don't think that they can, actually. I don't think we will ever get far out of our solar system. Um, and so I think that the scales of physics basically preclude upon the possibility of extraterrestrial life, especially intelligent life, visiting us. I think it's likely they exist, but I think it's basically physically impossible for them to get here. So, but I think that the mythology around aliens has everything to do with the same kind of mythological tropes that concerned people about angels and demons and gods and goddesses back in the day. Not that those two things can't exist simultaneously, though. Do I have kids? Yes, I have two wonderful children who I love very much. Um, Sweet kids. Yes, I have two wonderful kids. Um, it's a great question. Was Yahweh a rising and dying god like Baal? Um, what's interesting is that when the Israelites seem to take over the Baal mythology and apply it to Yahweh, or they take elements of the Baal story, like him fighting Leviathan. Um, what they don't have him is him fighting death. And by the time the Israelites are writing down their texts, Yahweh already controls death. And so there's no the narratives around Baal fighting death and then being dead for a period of time and then being brought back to life. Um, those don't survive into the Yahwist adaptation of Yahweh. And but yeah, it's just a conspicuous point that other things like him fighting with Leviathan, Lotan, and Ugaritic, that does survive, but the combat with death doesn't. So, like I said, Yahweh clearly has conquered death in the Israelite mythology. Thank you for the condolences about my dog. Yeah, it was super sad, guys. I mean, and I'm sure all of you know, many of you have pets. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard Mississippi in the background of videos, barking at the mailman or snoring in the background. Yeah, my dog got really sick while I was traveling in the UK, and I tell you, folks, it is absolutely gut wrenching to watch your pet who's been my little friend, my little constant companion for 10 years. I've had her for 10 years, and to watch her die over WhatsApp was just crushing. Um, just absolutely crushing. It's just super sad, and had to put her on ice until I can get back to bury her. But yeah, it's like losing a friend. It's just like losing a family member. Man, it's a crushing blow. But we gave her a good send off. I think that it was good for the kids to sort of see death for the first time in a way, and go through the process of grieving and trying to understand what death is. And pedagogically, as a parent, it's like really hard to sort of want to teach your kid about death, and also like your dog is dead and you love your dog and you miss your dog. Um, but yeah, it was a moment where we all got to dig. I dug a grave, and we all got to put her in the ground and send her off with all her toys. And it was even a moment where I get to teach my kids about sort of some Greek mythology. We put 3 cakes with Mississippi, so she could avoid Cerberus and 2 coins so she could pay the riverman Chiron to bring her over the Styx. So again, it was a moment where I was deeply sad, but also again trying to be a good father and be pretty committed to good pedagogy. And this is the moment to learn about death, and even through my own grief, I hope I was able to to grieve with my kids and also teach my kids and be present with them as we go through the process of saying goodbye to our dog Mississippi, which was, like I said, folks, super sad for me, still sad for me. But such is the way of the world. Do I think that Hildegard wrote the Voynich manuscript? No. The Voynich manuscript's about 350 years newer than Hildegard. So at least the manuscript as we have it could not have been written by Hildegard, because it's a product of like the 1450s, and Hildegard is writing in the 12th century. So it's several centuries too late to have been written by Hildegard. Also, sometimes people think that Edward Kelly wrote the Voynich manuscript, or John Dee. It's also 50 years older than them, or at least 50 years older than them. So they're not candidates for it either. Also, not one person wrote the Voynich manuscript. Paleographers think that up to 4 to 5 scribes worked on it. So it's not even the work of one person. It's the work of at least 4 to 5. And this is why I often say this is evidence against the whole crazy person wrote it theory. Is that because, well, not one person wrote it. 4 or 5 people wrote it. All right. Do I consider NDE experiences esoteric knowledge? Not really, because they tell people tell people about their near-death experiences. In fact, it's sort of a common trope now, right? You see the light at the end of the tunnel, or you see your life rush before your eyes, or whatever. So I don't know if I consider them esoteric. They're certainly an profound alteration of consciousness. And could they have a mystical dimension? Certainly. People often experience things like unity with the one, or unity with the light, or unity with God, and a near-death experiences. So are they mystical? Certainly seems like they can be mystical. Perhaps they are mystical, but I'm not sure I would consider them necessarily esoteric. If you want to learn about the logo of the channel, check out my episodes on Mayan mysticism, where I describe what the channel logo means, and it's also on my website if you want to learn more about what the channel means. All right. Let's go last few of the questions. Make sure I'm not missing any super chats before I have to sign off. Speculation prompt. Any materials explanations for the ancient Egyptian preoccupation with immortality technology? I think the same thing that we don't want to die. Dying sucks. And I think especially if you're a king that thinks he's a god, dying is really inconvenient for that, and so I think that when you combine, and this is just a materialist explanation for state power, right? The best way to get state power is to consolidate that state power through reinforcing it through ideology. And this is what Marx called the ruling ideas. And there's no greater way of doing that than literally saying that you're a god and having a cult built up around you. Death tends to get in the way of that. It's a inconvenient thing to die if you're a god, unless you're going to come back. And that's exactly what the immortality technology of the pyramids was meant to do. It was meant to bring these kings back and make them live forever in a certain kind of way, in the sort of the polar stars that never set. So I think that that's what's driving it. It's part of the state cult ideology. And I think it's just about holding on to power, dynastically perhaps, but largely driven through ideology. And also state projects are a great way of forming social cohesion, and certainly when the planting season's done and the Nile's flooded, you put people to work and pay them in beer and bread, and you basically reinforce the state cult at all the same time. Super convenient. Super convenient. Lord Inkydoo, thank you for the super sticker. I hope you're doing well. Speaking of dying and rising gods, I guess Inkydoo just died though. That's so sad. But I listen to your channel religiously while pregnant. No pun intended on religion. I just want to say thank you for your knowledge and sorry for the loss of your dog. Thank you. Well, I'm glad. I hope that listening to this channel while you're pregnant had no ill effects on your baby. Hope your baby is happy and healthy and sane and not weird. Or maybe I hope that your baby is weird in all the right ways. But thank you for your condolences on the passing of Mississippi. Is Zoharic Aramaic difficult to understand? Yes, yes it is. It's so weird to understand that Gershom Scholem, who was a linguist, by the way, a philologist, had to basically write his own glossary for Zoharic Aramaic. So yes, it is an idiolect, unique to the Zohar. It's not as strange sometimes as people make it out to be, but it's weird, and you have to learn it. Just because you can read the Bavli does not mean you can read the Zohar. It's a very different experience of Aramaic. The only time I've seen grown men ugly cry when their dog dies. Oh yeah, trust me, I was ugly crying all the time. No, I was. It was funny. I watched Mississippi pass in the oratory at Boleskine House. I'll tell you a funny story. I don't know if I was going to tell the story, but I'll tell it anyway. I was in the oratory at Boleskine House. This is where Aleister Crowley famously did the Abramelin ritual, or begun it at least. And when Mississippi, my dog, started to die, the power went out at Boleskine House. And it only went out in Boleskine House. I was talking to Keith, and he was like, "Yeah, the app that talks about power outages, no other power was out." And sure enough, the power goes out. And when the doctor or the vet said, she's gone, the power came back on. So I'm like sitting in the dark, on the Wi-Fi, watching my dog pass, into Olam Haba, and the power goes out at Boleskine House. And then when she's, gone, when she's dead, power comes back on. So that's weird. I don't know what to make of that. Magical Mississippi power. I don't know. Who knows what exactly? It could be Aleister Crowley playing a prank on us. I have no idea. But one of the most peculiar things that I've experienced in my life is, again, sitting in the oratory at Boleskine House, watching my dog be put down and the power goes out. And it comes back on once she's gone. Who knows, man? That is super weird. All right. A couple last questions before I have to get going. All right. Yeah. What do you think of free will, and does the occult have any say of determinism versus free will talk? Yeah, I mean, certainly I think that a lot of ancient texts, like astrology texts, are certainly concerned about free will. They're really concerned about fate. That was an overwhelming concern among ancient peoples that basically none of us have anymore. We don't really take fate very seriously. As for free will, I'm pretty doubtful it exists. I think it's a pretty persistent delusion. But I don't think it exists neurologically, and I would be surprised if it exists metaphysically. So I think neurologically I doubt it's there, and then metaphysically I doubt it's there too. So yeah, I'm pretty skeptical about possibilities of free will. All right. Will there be a part 2 about the historical Jesus? Yes, there will be a part 2 and a part 3 and a lot. The part 2 that I'm working on now is on Paul. I want to make an episode on what I would call the Gospel of Paul, because I do think the Gospel of Paul is distinct from the Gospel of Jesus. In fact, Paul himself says so. He refers to it repeatedly as my gospel. So yeah, the next episode will be an episode on Paul. and then I want to do an episode on James, and maybe an episode on Mary. So yeah, so lots of more content about around early figures in the Jesus movement to come. But the next one I think will be on the Gospel of Paul, not the Gospel of Paul, the apocryphal text, but the Gospel of Paul as Paul understood it and as Paul as a person. So, all right. What do I think about the idea that the Voynich manuscript was a template for manuscript production? I don't think so. I think that it was a fraud. I mean, I made an episode on the Voynich manuscript. I think it's a fraud. I think it's a medieval fraud. I think the math doesn't lie. Everyone who pretends to have a translation of the Voynich manuscript always throws themselves against the breakers of the math. It's a mathematical question. I think the mathematics of the Voynich manuscript make it clear that it is gibberish. There's no underlying meaning. So, all right, folks, I got to get going. I'm going to get one or two more questions, and then I got to get going. All right. This is interesting. Have you ever got any nightmares from reading stuff? You would be shocked to learn that I sleep the sleep of the righteous. I sleep basically with, I don't have dreams. Very rarely do I have dreams. Now, what you're going to say, of course, is that you just don't remember your dreams. Well, is there an analytic difference in some level? I don't know, but I basically put my head on the pillow and I close my eyes and I'm asleep, and then I wake up and it's just nothing in the between. But very rarely will I get a nightmare or a dream at all, actually. But very, very rarely will I get dreams, and sometimes about nightmares. Thank you. Somebody send you 1468 or 1400. Wow. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Very kind. Yeah, I don't know if it lets you do other denominations. Do I have any more plans for Esoterica publications? You really enjoyed Invisibility Day. Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed that as well. I pitched Dan on doing a translation of Trithemius, Trithemius's occult works that aren't the Steganographia. Maybe we'll do that one day. We might do some of Trithemius's occult works, but I don't know. Again, the Agrippa thing was just such an easy thing for us to do that it was like not exactly a one-off, but we'll see. We'll see. It all depends on schedules and stuff like that. But maybe. I'd like to. There's tons to do, that's for sure. But of course, Dan has tons of work he's working on as well all the time. So, all right, folks, I think I've come down to the end of the line. I love doing these. I love doing these Q&As. I love hanging out with you guys. It's really just one of my favorite things to do. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching the channel. Thank you guys for supporting the work I do. Thank you for being cool people. Thank you for supporting me when I come out and say, look, I'm not doing AI stuff, and these are my reasons. And you actually watch the video and, help me to understand you guys, because it's ultimately, I'm an educator in the service of you guys. And, I'm glad to have such a wonderful audience. I'm glad to have, such an amazing group of people surrounding me and supporting the work I do. So I am extremely grateful for that. One last super chat. Will I do anything on Giordano Bruno? Yes. I don't know when, but I will certainly start working on Bruno at some point soon. So yes, Bruno content will come eventually. But yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go. I got to go. And if you're in New York, please come to the Antiquarian Book Fair and come say hi. I would love to see folks in New York. And other than that, thank you guys very much for watching Esoterica and making the work I do possible. As an educator, this is the absolute most wonderful thing I could be doing in my life, and it's all thanks to you guys. So, all right, folks, well, have a great afternoon. Have a great evening, and I will see you guys in a couple weeks for a new video on the Iyun circle, the speculation circle with 13 Sphirot. So interesting stuff. All right, everybody, you guys have a great afternoon, and thank you.